Welcome to the Shadow of Mystery Friends. Today, I will tell you some mysterious hospital horror stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel before the video. Have a good time. Deep beneath London, buried in the earth, lay a secret that would send shivers down the spine of the modern world. In 2013, when excavation work began for a new metro line in the heart of the city, the workers expected the sound of metal striking stone, but instead, they heard something breaking. When they lifted the digger's arm, they were greeted by an ancient human skull, its empty eye sockets seeming to stare back at them. This was only the beginning. As the excavation continued, more than 3,000 human skeletons were unearthed from the ground. The site was cordoned off, and archaeologists and historians arrived to investigate the discovery. It didn't take long to trace the origins of these skeletons. They belonged to Bedlam Royal Hospital, more notoriously known as Bedlam. Bedlam was far more than just a mental institution. It was a place of torment and suffering, a hell on earth for those with mental health issues. Patients were chained, starved, and often left to die, their souls trapped within the walls of Bedlam. But the truly terrifying part was the strange occurrences that began at the excavation site once the skeletons were unearthed. Workers reported seeing shadows move in the corners of their eyes, feeling unseen hands brush against their backs, and hearing whispers when no one was speaking. Some claimed to hear the clanking of chains in the dead of night, as though the old asylum's horrors were coming back to life. One night, Tom, the excavation supervisor, went down to the site to check on things after a long day filled with endless reports. The air was cold, the wind fierce. As Tom looked around, he noticed a dark figure where no one should have been. At first, he thought it was a hallucination caused by exhaustion, but as the figure approached, his breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he began to back away, but with each step, the figure came closer. When the figure finally reached Tom's face, he realized it wasn't human. It was a decayed, rotting being, its skin peeling away, revealing the darkness beneath. Its mouth opened, and within was an abyss. The figure spoke in a guttural voice, "You haven't forgotten me, have you?" Tom's mind filled with the screams of the hundreds of people who had rotted away in Bedlam's dungeons. After that night, Tom was never the same. His mind was tormented every night by the same nightmares. The screams of the chained, echoing through dark corridors. His eyes constantly searched the darkness for something. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase the traces of that cursed night. Over time, he lost his sanity, quietly disappearing into his own private hell. The excavation was halted, the site sealed, and the skeletons were left to rest in silence. But beneath London, the curse of Bedlam continued to slumber, waiting. It is believed that sometimes, the strange sounds coming from the metro lines aren't just the trains meeting the tracks, but whispers from the depths of Bedlam. And one day, if those sounds rise again, the spirits of Bedlam may return to seek their revenge. Deep within the dark woods of Maryland lay a place long forgotten, Forest Haven. When it first opened in 1925, it was seen as a haven for children, a sanctuary where they would be prepared for bright futures, surrounded by warmth and love. At that time, it was filled with programs that provided basic education and supported the emotional development of the children. But those innocent, hopeful years gave way to darkness by the late 1960s as financial troubles began. The hospital, unable to sustain itself due to a lack of funds, canceled its programs, lost its qualified staff, and Forest Haven, once a safe refuge, became a neglected and dangerous place. For those who remained, a nightmare had begun. Patients started to die due to neglect, their numbers increasing silently. Hundreds of people were buried in an unmarked area on the hospital grounds, disappearing as if they were ghosts. But the dark history of Forest Haven didn't end there. Reports emerged that the bodies of some inmates who died there had been used for medical experiments. What the purpose of these experiments was, or what terrifying results they led to, remained unknown, but rumors suggested they had given rise to restless spirits. Years later, the hospital turned into an abandoned ruin, but it wasn't alone. At midnight, villagers in the surrounding area began to report hearing agonizing screams echoing through the forest. These sounds were more than just the rustling of the wind. It was as if the souls who had suffered there had returned for revenge. One night, a group of adventurers decided to explore the dark history of Forest Haven by entering the hospital. Fearlessly, they went inside, but what they encountered froze their blood. Dark shadows appeared in the hospital rooms. Whispers lost in the wind echoed within the abandoned walls. In one room, they found a rusted metal table with a medical file on it. Among the pages of the file were drawings of deformed organs and traces of dark experiments. At that moment, they realized something was terribly wrong. The darkness seemed to be closing in on them. One of the group members felt a hand touch his shoulder and turned around, but no one was there. They quickly decided to leave, but every door slammed shut behind them. It was as if an invisible force was trying to keep them inside. They managed to escape, but what they fled from wasn't just the darkness between the walls. They had left a part of their souls behind. From that night on, each member of the group began to have recurring nightmares. The screams echoing through the walls, the horrific stares of deformed faces. And the worst part was that these nightmares didn't stay in their sleep. Every night, a dark shadow began to appear in the corners of their rooms, never fully visible, but always felt. That night, Forest Haven came alive again. The abandoned hospital, silently spreading its screams through the depths of the forest, once again began to spew its curse. Everyone who entered left a part of themselves behind, but no one ever fully returned. Now, Forest Haven isn't just a hospital. It's a living entity, waiting for its next victim to claim. In March 1948, Highland Hospital, once recognized as America's first privately licensed psychiatric hospital and the treatment center for one of the most iconic jazz artists of the era, Zelda Fitzgerald, was about to devour all the hopes and sorrows within its walls. The hospital, which once held the memories, souls, and dreams of people with bright futures, had become a cold and dark place. Zelda had been battling her mental illnesses for years. The light that once shone in her life had slowly begun to dim. That day, as she waited for electroshock therapy, they locked her in a room. Struggling to confront the darkness and silence in her mind, Zelda hoped to regain the energy and joy that once filled her life. But at that moment, something went terribly wrong within the depths of the hospital. As Zelda was locked in her room, a fire broke out in another part of the hospital. The wooden walls succumbed to the flames, causing the fire to spread quickly. Smoke crept through the hallways, and the heat intensified with each passing second. Zelda felt the rising temperature as the fire closed in behind the door, but she had nowhere to escape. The cause of the fire was never fully explained, but that night, it wasn't just the flames that consumed Zelda. It was the accumulated grief, disappointments, and lost hopes of the years that closed in on her. Like the other women in the hospital, Zelda awaited rescue in those moments, but the doors were locked, and no one came to save them. After the fire, bodies were found among the hospital's ruins. Zelda's body was identified only by the slippers on her feet. But the real horror wasn't in what was found among the wreckage. It was in the rumors that the souls trapped in the hospital that night still lingered there. Years later, those who wandered through the remains of Highland Hospital began to report hearing music echoing through the dark hallways at midnight. The sounds seemed to echo from Zelda's past, filled with jazz rhythms. Sometimes, when turning a corner, you'd think you saw a figure out of the corner of your eye, a tall, slender woman, stepping as if wearing old dance shoes. But when you turned around, the shadow would be gone. One night, a young journalist decided to explore the ruins of the hospital to investigate Zelda's tragic story. With a flashlight in hand, he wandered through the cold, damp corridors of the hospital until he noticed that one of the doors was slightly ajar. When he stepped inside, he saw an old chair in the middle of the room, and on it sat a pair of slippers. The journalist approached the slippers, and at that moment, he felt the room's temperature suddenly rise. As soon as he took his eyes off the slippers, the room exploded in a ball of light, and the journalist rushed to the door. But the door was locked. The journalist knelt in the middle of the room, bowing his head before the slippers. At that moment, the room filled with the sound of musica jazz melody, as if playing for Zelda's last dance. As the journalist disappeared into the flames, only the slippers remained. After that day, no one dared to enter the ruins of Highland Hospital again, because something lingered there. The spirits of Zelda and the other women were still dancing their last dance, reliving the tragedy of that night. With every step, every scream, and every echoing jazz note, the curse of Highland Hospital lay in wait.